Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to present a workplace webinar titled Meaningful Growth, Platform Adoption to Innovation. My name is Kelly Williamson. I am the Community Manager of Workplace, and I will be your host for this presentation. I am located in East Syracuse, New York at the Center for Professional Development, and I'm looking forward to taking you on this journey. So today, we're really going to talk about the 6 phases of digital collaboration maturity and how workplace admins like yourself can move your group members through the pipeline to really achieve maximum engagement and platform adoption. Workplace is a really powerful tool, but your users need to understand how to use it and feel comfortable sharing information in there. We're also going to talk a little bit about different social media personas and understand how their individual potentials and contributions affect your group's success. I wanted to call out that some of our information is provided today by Facebook partner Swoop Analytics, and I have a lot more information from them if this is something you want to delve in deeper. Just let me know. So, we'll talk about the world is changing. It's never not going to change, and we need to be adaptable to that. So we know that digitalization is moving at the speed of light. We're having a lot of transformation, but we also know that not everyone is moving at the same time, at the same pace. So we need to be measured in any approach that we take, and we need to understand that there will always be someone that's holding us back from completely changing as quickly as we want to. When we're able to organize this into approachable steps, we're really creating a strategy that we can use to understand how people are approaching the change and how we can incorporate that change to really move them with us and find, hidden gems of information that we may not have known existed. During this process, we really try to break ground, right? We're trying to make significant progress, and we're really changing from the business as usual, boxy approach to being more fluid and embracing that culture of innovation in a way that's sustainable and makes sense. And I just talked about this a moment ago, but the end state keeps evolving as we keep changing. But also to remember, a good way to think about it is that, yes, we all have at least one cell phone. Some people have multiple cell phones, but there are places in even New York State where there's still not cell phone service. So it's a good analogy to think about when we're thinking about how we get our groups to really move with us. What do we need to do, and what do we need to provide these people to understand how they can be successful in this platform? We also need to make sure that we're still being relevant. So, that's really important. We want to make sure that we are not changing everything too quickly, but that we always take it back to, is this still relevant? Has this changed? And how can we call out specific strategies to keep ourselves relevant? I think it's important to know that no one has really reached the end of the digital transformation process because the end keeps evolving. All right. We also want to call out digital Darwinism. So we have this evolution of consumer behavior where society and technology is evolving faster than our ability to adapt. So when you think about, all the companies that we've lost for different reasons or another, I know there's still a Blockbuster around, but Polaroid's making a comeback, Circuit City, Borders Books, and others. But to remember that there was a cost to not realizing that they needed to stay on the top of their game and not realizing what that cost would be. Again, going back to that example I just spoke on a moment ago, where we all have a cell phone, we take it for granted almost, like some of us don't even use it to actually call people on. We communicate in different ways, but you have to remember that in places, even in New York State, there is no cell phone service. So we want to be able to inspire improvements in the way the institutions work, and we deliver that value through using a platform like Workplace, but know that there's going to be work behind the scenes to make sure that people feel comfortable using any technology. And hopefully when we get them comfortable and they feel like they can post, we'll have more success in our effectiveness and our competitive advantage by breaking down these silos. So we might have some digital Darwins. I think it's important that you poll your user group or your prospective user group to understand their comfort level with collaborating on a platform, as well as what kind of issues they might have, or things they've quote unquote heard, so that you can approach those problems proactively and head on. So they're not necessarily problems, they're just part of your training. So it's really important when we think about, here's an example. Someone says, like, I've never used Facebook before, I'm unaware of the lingo. Then we really need to work together, or you can host this or I can host this. We need to get them to understand the basis for Facebook. Like, what is the lingo? What do they need to understand? How do things operate? They'll know more. You'll feel confident in your ability to then show other people. It's really a win-win situation, but you need to realize that and know that so that you can plan for what's ahead. On the screen, you'll see an example of the maturity of growth. Throughout this presentation, you'll see a few different ways that this is visualized, but really, you see this book, this red book. We're taking that book, we're reading the book, we've read it. Think about, we've adopted the book, we've read it. Then we're meeting a friend who's read the same book. Obviously, this is a book club, right? But how does that process happen? Like, how did you find out about the book club? Did you have to sign up? Were there things you had to do before you could be a part of it? All these steps along the way are the same way that we would basically adopt to our platform. So we start out very similar. Them logging on. They get a little bit of user engagement. They start to connect, but they haven't shared. Then they need to help solve a problem before they can really innovate. And the innovation is really that last step. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. I have a larger sort of drawn out example of this maturity of growth diagram. But really, obviously we're starting with the initial step, but we need to become reliant on this as sort of our path to get people from adoption to innovation. And what pitfalls do we have along the way? And with these pitfalls, there's obviously also personalities. So obviously, for some of you that might be joining today, this is very simple. Adoption. Most of us are already through that phase, but some of us haven't started our group yet. We need to know what our intentions are to get them to log in and start. And obviously for measuring users and observers. So you're going to hear the word observer a lot. The observer is pretty much the lurker, someone who's part of the group but doesn't contribute, doesn't react, but you could see that they've seen the post. These are very important because they're the unknown. They're the wild card in this situation. All right, so with that intent and our adoption, we want to make sure that we've removed as much friction as possible. Again, some of you might be already well past this point, but for some of you that are working with newer groups or planning out your approach, these are some things that you want to make sure that you call attention to. And throughout this, I should say, I'm available to help you with every part of this. We can draft out your strategy. I'm also working on a document that will be done this week that really takes you through the personas and the strategies that you need to sort of engage each role the best of your ability. But these are some things that we need to make sure that we're talking about. The email whitelisting in the workplace accounts bucket really isn't as important because we've already taken care of most of that with the identity management and the single sign-on. But we might encourage people to have the shortcut. Do they have the apps? We want to make it as easy, convenient as possible to join Workplace. And once it's easy and convenient, we want to help them customize it, which is the second area of that. User engagement. This is our big thing, right? And you see that graph, like, we're going to do something, and then people are like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then there's a drop off. So we need to make sure that we're consistently and constantly providing reasons for the users to visit the site. We need to have that content that makes sense. We have a clear ask. We want to be able to get information from them and give them information in return, a really great information exchange. We want to have some mutual agreements of of how people are supposed to act in this group. So with this, it's really important that when you create your group, you fill out that about section and you let people know and understand what they're being a part of. So in this group, we are going to share monthly best practices regarding purchasing. We are going to contribute to a larger strategy that affects all of our campuses. Those sort of action items, those goals, really help people frame like, hey, I found this article, let me post it here and say, this article makes a lot of sense because one of our goals in this group is X. And with those sorts of engaging content, we will really be able to build the conversation. And then you can obviously measure this by the shares, offline comments. Like that's another thing to think about is while you're engaging in Workplace as a platform, you're also seeing your colleagues, you're working with people across the system in conferences and other events. Try to get their feedback on what's happening in that group. Like, what would you like to see in the group? Did you like this post? What did you think about that conversation we had about publishing or student success? If you have pointed questions, you'll be able to get a lot of qualitative data that either helps you, form your group or shift the focus based on what they want it to be. Talked about consistency is key. We want to give them ways to engage, and again, going back to that friction, removing as much as we can. So when we're thinking about signing people up, how do we do that? Email. We send them to the link. We can also craft a strategy that when we reach out to everybody, I take them along the path. I call this my concierge approach, where I port them into the group. They don't have to do anything once they log on, but then how do we follow up with them? So you should always be thinking about what the next move in your group is, because we want it to be consistent, we want it to be engaging, we don't want it to fall flat. And you'll see I put strongly worded letters, haha. I left this in, this was a presentation I originally did last year, and we were more so focused on the PIF groups joining. So while this is still the same, you'll see it's, some of our engagement and ways has changed. The connecting stage, this is what we're going to talk a lot more in depth in a little while regarding identifying your key players, who's going to be that ambassador for the group, and how can we leverage them to make your job easier while also bringing new value to the group. And obviously, we're going to measure that connection by do you have people actually commenting? How many people have seen your posts? What's the conversation quality like? Are people sharing links? What do those links look like? Are they showing them just to show them to you? Or is there some ask or intent behind it? Measuring that intention and the engagement in just the words and the fact that they're logging in on a regular basis and contributing is huge. And then sharing. Obviously, this is a more engaged user. This is someone who's creating their own threads, posting on their own without a nudge, replying to people, having that conversation. That active sharing of knowledge is so valuable, and we have seen groups that have hit this right off the bat, and then we have seen some groups that are slowly coming up to that comfort level based on what they think they can and cannot do in the groups. In these groups, you definitely see this increased comfort and camaraderie. And then again, taking that outside of the platform, this might also be true when they see each other at an event. And a funny story where I was at a conference over the summer last year, and we had an unfortunate incident in our hotel room and we were evacuated at 3 o'clock in the morning. And because of that, we couldn't go back to our rooms for 5, 10 hours. Some of us had to spend the night again. It was really interesting because that carried over from our real life experience where some people didn't have shoes. I didn't have makeup on. I barely had one phone charger for 27 people. But we took that and we talked to each other on Workplace more. So it was almost the reverse, where you have that sense of camaraderie over bonding over a shared experience. Most of our users have this shared experience at their workplace or something that they've been tasked to do. So how can we leverage that and share more openly to get a larger feeling of engagement? And then once you identify your most engaged users, which is usually pretty easy based on their posting frequency, take their temperature outside of the group. Like, let's say John Doe is your best poster. He's really great. You should probably make him an administrator too, because he's just so good. I would have a conversation either through chat or on the phone or in person and say, John, you're so good in the group, and you're really helping to foster that environment. What do you think the other people need to be like you? Really doing the work, putting the work in to understand how you can create a safety net for the rest of your members. Solving, this is that point in the diagram where it's really about the two-way connections. This is what we've seen. We've seen some people jump right to solving, where we see these questions about what vendors are you using, how do you approach this, how does your campus do this? At this phase, we're looking for a lot more of a response rate. We're looking for some reciprocity, and obviously that two-way connections and conversations. Like, hopefully it's not just two-way, it's 50 to 50. This is a really great spot to be in, because you're sort of surpassing the social networking area and you're moving into fulfilling what your group is supposed to do. And then obviously innovation. So we're trying to create new value utilizing what we've already built. So you can see here, we've got some organizational performance framework, and I have more information about this. Obviously, we're looking for a diverse population in your group, and that's true with the personas that I'm going to show you in a bit. But we're really looking for you to have high cohesion and high diversity, which means you have a bunch of different personas in your group, and you're able to maximize performance because everyone is playing a part. That being said, you want to make sure that you have a mix of personas, and if you have two dominant personas, we'll want to talk about that afterwards, because we want to make sure that we have a good mix to have the highest rate of cohesion and performance. And we'll get more into that in a minute. And again, why do these transformation points matter? And we talked before, connectivity, that's easy. I can force someone to be connected by sending them an email and asking them to join. But I can't force them or ask them even nicely to solve a problem or to innovate on the group. And that's really where our conversations are built on understanding what motivates our users, what their personality is like, and what they're looking to get out of the group. One of my goals on Workplace in general is to introduce the platform to as many people on the campus as possible, because while they're joining for one affinity group or one departmental need, when they're on there, they can then think about and get creative with other ways that Workplace can help them in their day-to-day, whether it's cutting down on email by utilizing work chat, or helping to network across the system to even solve more problems. And then I'm also helping them with their own access. As a professional in the SUNY system, perhaps based on a campus, how can I help them to network across the entire system and find information that they may not have been privy to before quickly and give it a value? And when I'm able to do that, I'm really solving some problems for them, which hopefully they'll turn around and start sharing out more information to our individuals that are in the groups. Here's another way of looking at it. This was a Simon Terry graph from 2014, a diagram where the further that we go up the chain, so this is very much like the yodeler game in The Price is Right, except no one can fall off, right? This is a only positive game going on. When we're connecting, sharing, solving, and innovating, the more that we do for our group members and the more that we facilitate this process, the higher the value the groups have, the more trust, the empowerment. When I was at Facebook in the fall, I got to talk for a few minutes about Workplace on the SUNY system because it's so unique. And while we're talking about collaboration and being agile and responding to things quickly and embracing social media, Workplace is empowering users, especially on a campus, to not only provide that information, to share, to solve, to try to innovate. They're taking a stake in this greater SUNY system and saying, like, I want to be part of this, and there are different opportunities that I now see on Workplace that I may not have known about before. And that's incredibly powerful. And I do have personal experience when I worked on a campus of not realizing things that I would have been able to take part in because I didn't know, because someone on the campus, maybe overlooked me, maybe they didn't realize that I was interested in. And the thinking about how this tool can help me to empower me to be a better member of the SUNY community by getting involved more. So it's another way we're really creating value here. And here's the upgraded diagram that we had in the beginning of the presentation, where obviously you can see what sort of key indicators you want to have or look at. And we can get really technical and assign numbers and goals to these, especially when we're talking about connecting and building a key player index. But for the sake of this presentation, we're going to go very, very elementary. So, how many people do we have? People are responding. When we're talking about a key player index, we're really identifying your ambassadors, the people that are your big power users, people that you can rely on to share information. And then some other things that you can be looking at upon, up on the way to see that, oh my God, we're kind of going over that hump of social networking where we're getting into the fulfillment stage, where the response rate has been really great. I put something out, maybe an hour later I have 3 comments and some responses, reactions, maybe it's a GIF or 2 depending on what I'm looking for. Ways that you can really plot your success. And if you want, we could take a step back and assign goals and kind of move you through the stages depending on how comfortable you are in this environment. We're really going to talk more about the connecting stage in this next part of the presentation, because that's when we get to understand and get to know our group members more, where they're in the group. We might even have someone that posts like, I'm in this group, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. That's actually not that bad. It might look bad to you, or try not to take it personally. That's a great opportunity for you to reach out to that person on the platform, educate them, and that and then you can sort of see how many people have viewed that post. Did anyone have a similar understanding, or were they all lost? And that's a cue for you to understand that, oh my gosh, I should probably have communicated better in the beginning. Let me try to back off a little bit and come back at this another way. And then if that happened to you where someone was kind of coming at you in the group, even though obviously you didn't want that, you might say, it's so great, we're actually going to have an introductory webinar, and then just contact me and we can work to make sure that people understand a little bit more about your group. Maybe it's another handout, maybe it's a group call. There's a lot of different ways to recover from a scenario like that. But that also helps you to get to know your people a little better when they're the most honest. Nothing is anonymous in workplace, which is good because you're able to see who's answering those polls, who's posting, and you can always follow up with them by just picking up the phone as well. That's always great to catch someone off the platform, to understand and hear their inflection in their voice. Maybe if you can see them in person, really gauge where they're coming from. And then again, you can be proactive to address those insecurities or those feelings of uneasiness that might come from using a new platform, or this is like a taboo thing to use. And this, I should also mention that I am recording this webinar and I do have these slides available. So there's no need to feverishly be writing anything down. It'll all be available for you. There are some other resources available if you really want to drill down into user engagement. The Simon Terry model we obviously talked about, and then Swoop Analytics, which is a workplace partner who does a lot of research on the engagement, and they're actually the creators of these personas. I mean, they're not the creators of the words, but they're the creators of these images that I will be using. And they've been kind enough to allow us to use this because they really want Workplace to be successful, and they have a huge partnership with Workplace in making sure that the research is being done regarding how people need to look behind the platform to understand why it's successful or why it hasn't been. So you see there's 5 personas: catalyst, broadcaster, engager, responder, and observer. You're really you're everything, right? But you're the boss, you're the administrator in this scenario. So when we're going through these, I wouldn't think about yourself as the leader of a group. I would think about yourself where you're a member of a group that might not be run by your colleague even. That way you'll be able to sort of self-diagnose yourself a little better. But you can see engagers and responders are very similar to each other. They're the goody goodies. They're the ones that are doing it all. They're the honor student. They're the heart of the network. The engagers are the heart of the network. They're balancing talking and listening. They're always available to share what's going on. They're dependable. The engager is really going to be one of those people you look for to be that ambassador that you can lean on and maybe, help them maybe aspire to be a co-administrator with you, or someone who takes a more active role in the group or committee. Responders as well. A responder is exactly what it sounds like. They're a good listener and they respond and they show that they provide value by what they respond with. A catalyst. So they are going to be initiating sharing a lot. They are your big dogs, maybe people that have a lot of clout, that are asking for things and people want to respond to. They might just be well placed in the organization, or they might have a great post. They might not even have, let's say it's just a random regular person, but their post is good. So their post becomes the catalyst. So they provide good information up front, and their ask is something that attracts people to respond. So it doesn't always just have to be, you don't have to be like super cool and alluring to be a catalyst. It can also be your information. So if I said Campus X is going through this rebranding process and we've initiated contact with a public relations firm that also represents Nike. Does anybody have any suggestions on how to move forward? We're really interested in collaborating and applying for an award afterwards, or nominating ourselves for an award. That might speak to a certain person who wants to win an award, likes Nike, or is in a similar spot. Those sorts of name droppy, very interesting asks, maybe a promise of more, are all catalysts. When you think about what motivates someone, something like that has a few indicators for motivation. It might also be something like, hi, my name is Kelly. I'm working with Chancellor Johnson on a proposal, and I'm looking for a few people to be on the committee with me. We're going to meet via webinar next week. Message me below if you're interested. That might elicit a lot of responses, because they're like, oh, Kelly, she's very close to the chancellor. She's working with her, and I want to see my status rise as well. They might also be generally interested in providing content. You don't want to read too much into it, but that's really the best example of a catalyst, someone that's able to spark some sort of action from people without a lot of information. Broadcasters are people that we see that are posting for the sake of posting. They don't really participate in conversations, but they like to share. So they're doing it as sort of it's a comfort instinct. I want you to know about it. They're the FYIers, like, hey, check this out. A good broadcaster is someone who sets up the post and they talk about why they're posting it. So I was motivated to share this link from MIT's website because they're talking about this weather station, and I think it would help us with our weather station project. Check it out below and let me know what you think. That's a great example of a broadcaster that can have value to your group. They're finding something, they're understanding how it affects the group, they're explaining it, and then they're asking to have a conversation about it. So they're really checking off all the boxes in terms of a successful post and creating that content. Some broadcasters don't bring as much value, and those are ones that are simply broadcasting. Also, if you have a broadcaster or a few in your group, what I would recommend is, it's fine. The mix is you need to have a little bit of everyone going, in place here. But I would make sure that your broadcasters understand that they should be setting up their posts effectively, and that if they are simply sharing links, we also want to make sure that the link, so this is very more technical for a workplace. When you copy and paste a link into your post, after that link generates and there's usually a photo, make sure that they're deleting that link out and then posting, because on Facebook they do it automatically, but Workplace doesn't, because they don't want you to lose a link if you actually need to share that link. So it's a more manual process. But by removing that link, what happens is that when your group members get an email notification, they get to see the whole post. If the link is left, they'll get a notification that simply has that link in there, and that is not going to inspire someone to click on that post and log into Workplace. And we have had that happen where people have questioned, like, is this spam? Why am I getting this? I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with this. These are things that I have actually heard people. And the corrective action is to reach out to that broadcaster and say, hey, can you make sure that you take the link out after the file preview generates, because so-and-so, or group members, they're not being able to be notified effectively, so that we can have a good conversation in here. And ultimately, we want to try to entice/inspire broadcasters to have a better setup with their posts. And then there's observers, so the lurkers. They're there when you see how many people have seen your post. You could see that lurker's in there. They're always looking, but maybe they're not. They're definitely not commenting. They're definitely not sharing. But it's not part of their day-to-day activity, and they're really the challenge. And for some people, that challenge will never be able to move them. But for others, we might be able to engage them in a way that motivates them. And I think an observer is someone who's really ripe for that post or outside workplace conversation. So the observer, like, okay, Jane Doe, she's in the group. I can see that she logs on from time to time. I see that she's seen the posts, but she doesn't respond. But she does her work, and she's at this conference. That's a great time to, like, maybe sidle up to Jane Doe with a drink or not and say, hey, I noticed that you're in Workplace. You don't really post a lot, which is fine. I'm just curious if you would like the opportunity to do more in the group, or is there something the group's not providing you that you would be interested in? It could be that maybe that observer needs a different reason to use Workplace. And by finding that information out, you can either devise a strategy yourself, or you can reach back out to me and say, I'd like to get so-and-so and Jane Doe more active, in it if I can. And that's very important. So the ideal mix for these groups, so you really want to obviously front load your positive personas, which are, the engager, the catalyst, and the responder. When you're thinking about your groups, about 30% should be engagers, about 30 to 40% should be catalysts and responders. So, if you have a smaller group, great. I mean, if you have a group of 15 people, this is very easily done. If they're all broadcasters or they're all observers, we should talk more about that. You want to have ideally below 10% broadcasters, and obviously, way below 10% for observers. But, the broadcasters, we can really change their ways and entice them out of their shell a little bit. Observers, we can do what we can, but you really want to front load your positive folks. And they're the ones that, when we're talking about positive, they're really just creating more value for your group and more engagement opportunities that aren't coming only from you. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for relationship building, right? At the end of the day, and we're trying to do it digitally. Here's a football analogy for you. Hopefully you play football, or you understand. We just had the Super Bowl. Where you can see that an engager is someone who's a central connector. They might be the quarterback. They might not be. They might just be the coach or a great just anyone who's a great communicator. A catalyst. They are. They got that ball. They're running it. They're running the play. They're challenging everyone, but they're not always challenging, right? They're the unicorn. Your goal is to find more people that could be a catalyst. And again, that comes from that organic conversations that happen. So if I'm talking to Shirley, you know, works in accounting, and she talks a lot about interests that she has and things that she's involved in. But up to this point, she's maybe just been a responder or maybe even an observer. We can turn Shirley into a catalyst by picking up on things that she's involved with and using them for our group. So we might say, like, Shirley, you know, our group is financial best practices. You just went to this big CFO conference. Could you post about like two takeaways that you had and ask people, you know, how they feel about those, or some upcoming trends? And, you know, by encouraging her and asking Shirley to actually post, you're putting her on a spot, so to speak, but hopefully she's a good team player at the same time, and she's able to share, like, she went to the CFO conference, it was in Vegas, and they actually took a tour of a cage. Maybe that's part of it. You know, she's like, oh my God, we went to Vegas, and we went to a casino, and we saw a cage, and they gave me like two big things that they always do every night. And I found these were really interesting because we're accountants. So she shares that. That's a real catalyst piece of content, because people are like, oh, Vegas, that's interesting. Cashier, this is a new way to look at something that's happening in our industry. And then, you know, once that conversation sort of sidles down and maybe it becomes, you know, a little old, couple weeks, she might go back to a broadcaster, or excuse me, a responder, an observer, but she might become a catalyst again, or she might probably be a broadcaster, where she'll find an article that supports the conversation that you had, and she'll share it out as saying, like, hey guys, that we had that great conversation a few weeks ago. Here's a follow-up from this professional organization about, you know, the trends we were just talking about. I thought you'd all really appreciate that. And then she's just a broadcaster. People might thank her. They might react. Maybe they'll post a money GIF. You know, those are all acceptable responses, because now Shirley's sort of moved out of this observer bucket, and she's been a catalyst. Now she's a broadcaster, and she'll probably be a responder and a good support player from now on. And you can see below the other two, the bench player here. And with these behaviors, there is a give and receive balance, which we just talked about in the Shirley example. Like, she's usually been a receiver or like a bench player, but she was able to be a giver. Like, this is information that only I know in this group, and I'm sharing it with you today. And she steps all the way back to maybe being a broadcaster or a responder. But there really is a nice, this is a really good graph that talks about the give and receive balance. And it really calls out why you want to have the majority of your people in your group are able to bounce around or are strictly responders, engagers, and catalysts. The broadcasters really do a lot of the cleanup work, and the broadcasters can keep your group fresh while you don't have some big pieces of content available. But you really want to have these positive people interacting, you know, a couple times a week as a goal. And you might be the one who needs to be the catalyst and the engager at all times. And basically, you know, when that happens and you're the one primarily posting, you don't be afraid to tag people by using the @ symbol and typing in that person's name and asking them, you know, if they've had a similar experience. And you don't want to put anyone on the spot, but it might be as simple as Shirley's in this group, this financial group, and she knows that Marcus has a casino management program on his campus. So she might say, at Marcus, how do you teach this to your students in your casino management program? She's creating more value, you know, in just a short amount of time by calling out someone. But again, you can't call them out blindly. You need to know things about them, which goes back to that initial conversation about talking to your members, getting a sense of what they're looking for, getting a sense of what they need in this group. Or, you know, for some of us, it might be that they have to be in the group. Okay, so if you have to be in the group, what would make it more valuable for you? Totally fine that you need to be in this group because so-and-so made you or asked you to do it, but how can I make this an enjoyable experience for you? It's really important to use this recognition any of these things where we're talking to them or we're asking for their opinion, we're really recognizing them as a member of the group and giving them a sense of belonging. And then we also want to make sure that we're following up on this recognition. So, we want to create this mutual admiration system, but we need to give them outcomes, right? We can't just always have conversations with them and then never deliver. We need to make sure that we're delivering in a timely fashion in a way that they find value in. So really think about that when you're creating posts or having conversations, even in the chat with your colleagues. So obviously the big question now is, now you thought about it, think about yourself, not as an administrator, not as a leader, just as a participant. Who are you? And if you're not happy with the results, or maybe you feel like you're still a super user and you'd like to take a step back, think about what you're doing in these groups and how you can change it. And you can always change over time as well. Like we discussed, you can fall back, you can move forward based on what you're doing, but the personalities are still there. So that really wraps up my information for this presentation. It is a shorter presentation, but there is a lot of information to unpack. So if you want to follow up with me, you can obviously find me on Workplace, or you can follow up with me, in a more in-depth way if you'd like. It's kelly.williamson@suny.edu. I am available to sketch out any strategy. Like I said, I do have a document forthcoming which explains the personas in a little more detail and really helps you sketch out action items and goals for each group. So how do you want to make sure that catalysts are identified? How can you start looking at people and trying to think I'm going to make it my goal to make Shirley a catalyst because I know she has great information that she's not sharing with the group. There's really a lot of research and planning that can be done behind the scenes to make sure that your group is effective. So with that, if anybody does have questions, I can definitely stick around, but I know it's a lot of information and this is recorded, and I can share the slide deck with you if you'd like, but I want to make sure that I'm answering any questions you might have. If you have a question, just you could type it into chat. I'll also put my name or my email address in there, so you can copy and paste it. And again, if you use Workplace, you can find me there. We'll also probably put this on YouTube. So for individuals that are outside of our organization that are interested in Workplace, please follow up with me on email and I can help explain it to you. And I can also help connect you with someone at Facebook that can help you with the overall process. So I don't see any questions coming through, so I appreciate everyone taking the time to join me today, and I look forward to chatting with you more about your group. Oh, I got one chat. Oh, no problem. Thank you very much as well, Mark. I'm here for you to plan this strategy. This is a system that we have invested in, and we are making a significant investment in, people-wise. So we're looking to make sure that it's relevant and fresh for the long haul. So thanks so much, and have a great afternoon.